So we'll jump right on in and introduce Michael Moore, who is, we can consider him an Atlanta native, I think now, can't we?
Close enough. At 49 plus years, I'm getting darn close to be that 50-year mark.
I think you are. So we'll claim you as our own. How about that? So anyway, we're gonna. Michael has been here, like you said, for almost 50 years, and he's been in the banking industry. But he's also been so involved in our community and working with others to help build them up in the area, building their businesses through entrepreneurship programs. And so I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you take the time to tell us about you, your life, your family, and your legacy, and also just your walk with our Father and how Jesus has inspired and directed and helped you along this journey and this adventure we call life.
Well, to give a speaker a microphone and an audience, wow.
It's yours.
I'm only ready for about 3.5 hours. So if you haven't had lunch yet, you may want to go ahead and pick up your lunch. Make sure you go ahead and get your second cup of coffee if you haven't had that yet. And let's just dive in. Do you have any, well, let me, I'll open up with the Christian walk because that's kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
There have been several, it may be even many, let's use the many occasions in my life where something has happened. And I'll probably talk about some of those today that brought me a wake-up call or closer to the Lord, or if I wasn't close enough, it made me spin around and realize what I might have missed. And I'll use one of my favorite kind of quotes. It's not really a scripture, but you could say it's in the Bible somewhere. And it goes something like, if you didn't be grateful for the things you had yesterday, that might be all the things you have today. And so if you're not grateful and prayerful, and we'll look forward to hearing from Don later and look here to prayer requests and all. But if you're not grateful and prayerful for your things you have, why do you deserve them? And, a non-Christian wouldn't understand that because a lot of things get in the way between family and ego and jobs and golf games, fishing, motorcycle riding. I don't know what they might think is more important than whatever they've got on their agenda. But as Vera said, or may not have said because she didn't read my bio, I'm an Alabama boy. I have been in Atlanta since November '75. I came here to work for, at the time, we thought would be the Bank of America, CNS National Bank, and guess what? It became Bank of America. Mm-hmm. I remember my very first officers meeting, December, I guess it was, of '75. Mills Lane, who is one of the members of the founding family and was the president before he retired, opened our officers meeting by saying, here we are, the citizens in Southern National Bank, the premier bank of the Southeast. And one day we will be the bank for America, because I remember very specifically, he said for America. And that was before the state decided not to have statewide banking. And that's a longer story, but that's why I'm not a banker anymore. So we're so glad to have the North Carolina banks present in our city. So moving on for that, but as I learned about family and people and stuff, I grew up on a farm, so I had to get up before the chickens. On a personal note, one of my favorite books is Jimmy Carter's book, The Hour Before Daylight, because that's the way the farm starts. I've been getting up between 4 and 5 all my life, and I hope to be able to do that all my life until the day I pass and the Lord takes me home. I'm sure He'll wake me up early when I get there as well. Recovering banker is an interesting story because when I was in the banking industry, I got very familiar with companies and their problems. Most of those relate to financial issues. Not enough, too much. And those affect our lives. Those are one of the reasons why being a Christian is very beneficial to me. We don't let the little things of life get in our way to be a good Christian. It's a hard thing to do, and it requires working prayer every day. But I did grow up in Alabama, grew up on a farm, enjoyed community work at a very early age. I tell one of my stories, and I won't tell it all today, but how many people do you know that helped start rescue squads, who helped train adults what civil defense meant? I had that opportunity in the 50s and 60s to teach even firemen how to be what we now call paramedics. I have a moving story. We used to do firework as Boy Scouts with the fire department. We could always get there faster because about 6 of my Boy Scouts all rode motorcycles. And so we'd get a call at the school, and they would announce it. The principal would announce it. Rescue squad members may be excused. We'd go out and jump on a bike. We would get to a brush fire or a house fire before the fire department sometimes. That taught me the importance of that. But I had the experience of having in a rural area, a woman die in a fire around a house. And I was there with her when she passed. And we couldn't evacuate her. She was burned pretty bad, but she was still alive when we got to her. Another experience very similar was a nurse was rushing to the hospital to get to the emergency room. She had an accident, ran into a power station, learned a valuable lesson. Crawling into a power station with a dying person in the car upside down, and the firemen are standing there, and you're 14 years old, leaves an impact. Taking on from that impact of meaningful moments, and you can probably imagine what those two meaningful moments meant, was writing my first letter as a military officer home to the mother whose son was not going to return. And then being allowed to and privileged to deliver his body home and be there with the family. That took about 4 or 5 days, but I think that was taxpayer dollars well spent. Because if it didn't benefit the family, it certainly benefited me and my walk the rest of my time in the military. And then carrying that forward to working with folks. In my experiences, people go, gosh, Michael Moore moments. The time you jump in, I seem to parachute into some situations. I've worked for companies that were startups that made it, and I've worked for companies that were startups that didn't make it. We had to shut down. Those are typical processes. Other than being a recovering banker, I am a personal and professional business coach. And that exposes me to people at their most tender times. I've watched folks be involved with, how can I be in business? What should I be doing in business? Is my mission correct? Is my employees correct? One of our folks, I forgot the guy who did it, but it's a fellow who wrote the book about being on the right bus and being in the right seat. And if it doesn't matter if you're on the right bus or not, if you're not in the right seat, things aren't going to work out very well. I think that's what the Lord does for us. We all don't believe in predestination. We do believe in heaven. So we need to go down that road a moment. God has a plan for every day of your life. And he's had that since before you had life. And if we approach it by saying that no matter what we do, to try to do what we think is right, we need to be raising our eyes and raising our hands and raising our hearts, as well as our ears sometimes. Sometimes it's that preaching in the pulpit. Sometimes it's that unasked for answer to a question that you didn't even know you had. One of my mottos in coaching is, I'm a resource for you. And that resource helps you identify, locate, and obtain resources you did not know you needed. You did not know you needed. That's a powerful tool in the marketplace today, because we have all the instant media and all the instant messaging and all the, somewhere maybe 700, 800, 1,000 stations on the internet. We can actually dial in anything we want to hear. We have to make meaningful determinations about what we want to hear and when we want to hear. And if we listen to God, he's going to let us channel check and dial in to just the right message. I listen on many Sunday mornings to Charles Stanley. And when you do that, you think how history passes by you and how you've passed by history. Because the sermons, although maybe they be 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years old, just depending on how his Bible looks and how his hair looks and how his tie and shirt looks. But, the messages are timeless.
Yes.
Most people don't take enough time to open their Bible and look. I'm going to give you one of those personal stories. I mentioned that there's a couple of turning points in my life. I traveled extensively 3 to 4 to even sometimes 5 and 6 days a week back in the early 80s when I had 2 children. And in the hecticness of packing, I didn't pack my Bible on a Monday or Sunday or whatever day it was I left home. And so I was all day long, I'm making calls, I'm driving between cities because I had a territory that was pretty large. But as I got close to the end of the day, I'm thinking, I really don't have my Bible. Should I stop and pick up one? I thought, no, I don't need to do that. God's going to provide me a Bible. Well, this was back in the 80s. So many of you know what I found when I got to my hotel room. But I've been sort of worried about that all day long. And I developed a habit for the rest of the time I travel. Whenever, and we don't have it anymore as much as we do, but you won't find a Gideon's Bible in every room. But most of the places in the South back in the day, you would find the Gideon's Bible and it would be opened. And most people would do what? They immediately close the Bible up or start to move to something else. Well, I took the policy of not closing the Bible and not turning to a different place. But I would take the 2 pages that were open and visible, and I would sit down and I would do my devotion at the end of the day with that Bible. And I still do that today when I find a hotel that has a Gideon Bible. I think that service person that opened this Bible and left it there was also led by God to do that. And so why don't I take his guidance right now? I might do something else after. which is something else after for me. As I was on a mastermind group the other day, and a question came out of the blue. Somebody said, "What do you do for your daily devotion?" And we had Christians, Arabs, Muslims, and we had Jews all online. But we all went around the table, there were about 8 or 9 of us on the call, and all qualified. And then the leader said, "What would you do if you didn't have your Bible, your Quran, or whatever else?" Well, we used to publish the little 4 Gospels and Psalms and Proverbs. But many years ago, I started to, whenever I guess felt like today's message is not for me, you just go to Proverbs. It's very easy to pick up your Bible study. Just read the right chapter, as long as you know what day of the week it is. With our digital phones now, it tells us July 3rd, Wednesday. That's all you need to have a meaningful day with the Lord. You'll find a lot of wisdom in there. And guess what? On the right day of the right week at the right time and the right proverb, which is going to be dictated, there's a message in there for you if you can do that. So here in Atlanta, it's been very interesting to watch the changes in the city today. And I'm hosting, yeah, there it is. I have a Paris 2024 pin on for the Olympics. My children were fortunate enough, I won't say lucky, fortunate enough to go to Paris a few years ago when the World Cup was in Moscow, and they stopped for 2 days in Paris, and they both fell in love with it. And so they decided, as an anniversary style trip or special trip, they wanted to go back to Paris just before the Olympics and see the changes from a few years ago. And they had special things they, of course, didn't get to do. They spent 10 days. Can you imagine if you came to Atlanta in 1995 and spent about 10 days before the Olympics and looked at God's work as he planned for Atlanta to be the focal point of the world? He brought the identity of the world to Atlanta through people. We still have remnants of it. Can you imagine what in Paris, because France is not the Christian nation that we would hope they would be, and things are changing quickly. So what is their legacy going to be as they go? One of my subjects today was legacy, and we talked about community service. I didn't get to my 3 hours yet, but I am on about 50 minutes.
No, you're good. Keep going.
So we have community service. I remember I moved into a community over in Decatur, north of the square. So it was a pretty stable community. Didn't have a lot of challenges that go on, but I got involved with the city government. Also got involved in my neighborhood association. And from that, I was challenged very quickly because we had 2 neighborhoods that weren't at odds with each other, but they were very different. But both of their community associations were struggling. And I'm a new guy on the block. I said, could I volunteer to be on one of the boards? Because I lived on the street. I guess you could be the other side of it. So as a result of that, about 3 years later, I was able to combine those 2 associations into one. It became the strongest community association in Decatur. Thereby, they began to have some influence on what really happened in the city, because we got our council person, then we were able to move the mayor to be from our 2 districts. Kind of neat. I did the same. I had the opportunity. I did, but through a major challenge in my life, a 14-year-old daughter, we moved from Decatur. Incidentally, it's tied together. We moved from Decatur over to beside Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, or then it was Scottish Rite over by the north side and so forth. Moved there in December. In February, she had a relapse of something she'd had the year before, which they thought was a viral infection. It turned out to be Hodgkin's cancer. So here I have a 14-year-old little girl. My wife did a beautiful job of taking on responsibility and managing my daughter's health. And I was walking down the lobby of the hospital, and I happened to know a senior officer in the Scottish Rite Foundation. He said, "I hear you're here." He just had found out about my daughter. He said, "I want to go visit you," and so forth. And he said, "Could you go to lunch tomorrow?" Okay. So we went to lunch. We went to lunch with him. And he says, "I got a favor I need from you." I said, "What's that?" He says, "Our Children's Healthcare Youth Cancer Association, which is called, I forgot now, needs a leader." So my daughter has cancer and I'm busy. He said, "No, your daughter has cancer and we need you." So 3 years later, I blended that organization. My daughter's now recovered and she has 3 beautiful grandchildren. But she's recovered. But 3 years later, I had united that association with CURE, which is the foundation for Emory Healthcare. Yes. And so now there's not 2 organizations doing the same thing. Of course, that was during a time when the two organizations, Scottish Rite and Children's, were merging anyway. Right. But to get rid of a satellite organization which had a national charter and bring it to a local charter to help grow with our members was quite a blessing. Community involvement. I'll pass on 2 more things and give you one of the things that's a highlight in my life. I think my bio mentioned it, but I've been 2 times president of the Buckhead Business Association, which is unique. Nobody else has done that to my knowledge. But I was able to take it over after, or move into office after 9/11. How do you keep a business organization going after 9/11? Well, for those of you out there who guess or gamble, my second term was COVID. How do you manage and get an organization out, and how do you make changes that can be lasting? I was fortunate and blessed to do that. Let me tell you, some of those days required reading the devotion twice and looking at Proverbs and wearing out one knee at least, if not both. But very much blessings, because the friendships I were able to establish there were very, very deep and very interesting. And obviously, between political officials and community officials and ambassadors and so forth. Because Buckhead has more foreign ambassadors than any other place. And I got to meet all of them. I got to be part of the process of both of those issues. They were. Can you imagine a foreigner dealing with 9/11 in our country? Can you imagine being out of your country and dealing with your family being somewhere else and you having to deal with your COVID? So great opportunity time. And that'll bring me to my last piece when I turn it back over to you. I happen to be fortunate enough for the last 14 years to chair an organization called the Buckhead 50 Club. It was designed in 1932, so it's 93 years old. It's an all men's group, almost non-existent type thing now. And we were a community service organization. We were the folks who started the police service and the garbage collection in Buckhead, which then 20 years later became part of Atlanta. And now, as you all know, even though we have a lot of big buildings, Buckhead provides over 60% of the personal property taxes in the city of Atlanta. So the hoopla, and I got involved with the hoopla of trying to make Buckhead a city again. You just can't do things like that. There needs to be some change and some continuity. There needs to be change, but there needs to be continuity. One of those opportunities are, I know everybody in my organization, about 80 guys, knows someone else and hasn't had to bless them. I've buried about 80 guys in 14 years. I've been a member for 25 years. So the story that God gave me was, when I plant you somewhere, why don't you stay for a while? So I wasn't a transit executive. I turned down offers in different cities, raised my kids here in Atlanta, buried my in-laws here, and I'm dedicated to it. I did coincidentally lose my wife 6 years ago to brain tumor, basically, a glioblastoma, which is not a treatable condition. But we had 5 blessed months to lead that process to move to an end. And of course, 6 years later, I am now a double cancer survivor myself, and still pretty active.
Very much so. I have to ask, as we, get these little silver strands that start coming up. And,
wait a minute, that's not talking about silver strands. Mine's all white.
As they start popping up, we do start thinking about life a little differently. I know we should all appreciate each day because we're not promised tomorrow. But, just knowing that we've been blessed to grow older and
Is that a blessing?
It is a blessing.
Okay.
It's a wonder. And to see you so strong and vibrant and active, it's like, we always look at Moses and his eye did not grow dim and he was not weak when he died. And I want to claim that too. It's like, I don't want my eye to be dim. I want to grow old and keep moving strong and making a difference in the lives of those around me and just doing whatever the Father calls us into. And so, given where you are and the impact that you're having, what do you think has been kind of the biggest influence to be involved in so many different areas? What has led you there? And what do you want your legacy to be when you leave those organizations?
It started when I was about 8 years old, literally, and I don't think it's any different today. But at 8 years old, my brother, who was a construction worker, he's 15 years older, was diagnosed with the beginning of skin cancer now. Mm-hmm. And he was a construction worker. So that meant that wasn't going to be a future career. He was 21 years old. I'm 8, no, he's whatever numbers, 8, 21, and 23. And I was watching television and a ad came up, what it would have been 62 or so. It says, newspaper routes available, must have car. Well, little paper routes don't make much money on your bicycle. It's pretty tough work. Must have car. He's got a car. I can sit on the front there. Maybe I could partner with my brother to be an entrepreneur. And that made a difference in his life because he had his first child. But it's serving, looking at things differently. And then we threw paper routes in the morning because we're farm kids. So we just got up a little earlier and did our job. But we threw three paper routes rather than one. So we made enough proceeds to help his family for 4 years. That started me in community service because it's amazing who you meet on paper routes back in the 50s and 60s. Taking that to the Boy Scouts, as soon as we stopped doing paper routes, I got totally engaged in Boy Scouts and became a leader of the organization to help young men become Eagles, of which I am one. I'm very proud. You do projects every week, every month. You've got a project you got to do. You got to coordinate young men to help you. You've got to get resources. You got to get parents to drive you. It's not just one spinning plate. It's not one spinning plate. In the military, I took multiple duties and I enjoyed those because it kept me busy. I learned a lot of things I wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn in banking. I did the same thing. I took on volunteer jobs. When people say, what's your most memorable thing about the old Braves ballpark, Braves and Falcons ballpark? And I can say truthfully, hosting 5,000 people for a Braves game on the 4th of July and having my name appear on marquee and my company, the CNS National Bank. But I led the bank club. Here's a young lieutenant / vice president who's leading an organization which most officers won't even fool with because it's all employees. They need to collect employees because 700 of those were mine at that time. So those things, community association, volunteer association, leadership and process and politics. Don't want to be elected though, so please don't vote.
We can't put you as a write-in.
No write-in. RFK would be offended if I would be write-in president. Write-in president. He thinks that's his job.
There you go. That's true. That's true. Well, we are so thankful that you came today to share with us and just to learn more about your yes and the impact of your yes. And I think for all of us, when we think about the impact of our yes and what a difference it can make in the lives of others. So thank you so much for being here.
We were here to talk about legacy a little bit today, and the legacy is in the United States, we have something no one else in the world has. We have freedom of speech. We have the right to bear arms. That starts it all.
Amen.
Thanks for your time today.
Yeah.
Enjoy being with you. Looking forward to a little holiday, a little barbecue, a little fireworks.
There you go. There you go. It'll be a good day. So just before the rain comes.